Good evening, everyone. This is Srinivas Lusaya. Today, I'll be briefly talking about web development trends and predictions. So, at the end of this module, you'll be able to know the importance of web development, understand the role of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, what role they play in web development, uh, a brief introduction to responsive web design, and so you will understand what a motion in user interface means. So basically the motion mean the motion of the elements in the web interface. Then we look at how can we get the page layout with Flexboxes, and then we'll have a brief look at an single page application using AngularJS, and we'll briefly touch upon the backend web development using PHP and Node.js. Yeah. So let's start with why do we need web development? Okay, why as a software engineers we need to be familiar with web development, and we should be able to do the web development if you're working in a web-based application. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go back to the need of web development. As you know, internet nowadays is ubiquitous. So any user can access the internet using a mobile device. It could be a smartphone, or it could be tablet, or through a desktop. So if a user or a customer need to find you or your business, and the first and foremost mechanism through which they discover you is nowadays internet. In earlier days, people were discovering you through marketing material or through telephone numbers. But nowadays, the internet is the first and foremost mechanism through which your customers or your potential clients will discover you. So if you have a website on the internet, then that builds trust in your organization or in you as a professional. And other words, you can say that it improves your reputation as a person or as an organization. So, and to just sum it up, if you have a website on the internet, then it is your first the salesperson which works for you round the clock. Note that a website never sleeps, so it's always on. And depending upon the time zone, it could be, let's say, if this website is hosted in India, but a customer or user is based in, let's say, in USA. So when it's in USA, it's daytime, in India nighttime. But a salesperson in India will not be helping the customer in USA. That's when your website will come in handy. Let's look at let's understand what a website is, and why do you need a website. As I said, website it creates the first impression of your business to your potential clients and your customers. So you need to create it to suit the needs of your target audience. You don't create a website for yourself, to be used by you. The target audience for your website is your customers and your clients. It reflects, if your website is appealing, visually appealing, then it reflects on your expertise and your reputation. So to have a good reputation with your clients, then you need to have a good looking, professional looking website. So note that once your website is up, since any customer or client will be able to discover you and your business from any part of the world, that means that that will bring you more business. And a website should be such a way that it should entice the user to take action. So here in this case, action is, let's say, it should encourage the user or a visitor or customer, they should give a business to you. So that is the main purpose of the website. So to create a website, you need obviously web development skills. See, you might have heard the words web designer and web developer. So, but not many people understand the difference between a web designer and a developer. So let's, I would like to clear the doubts. So who should be called a web designer and who should be called a web developer. Web designer is basically responsible for the look and feel of a website. In other words, the creative side of the website is what is done by web designer. So he basically decides what should be the layout of the page and what font should be used, what size, what color, and what images where they should be placed. And so to sum it up, the overall branding of your company and you as a professional. So all that should get reflected in the design of the website. So the web designer is a person who creates a visual markup of the website. So so when I said visual markup means he'll use a Adobe Photoshop or any other graphic editing tool and creates a almost a real like a image of your website. Note that until now, rarely a web designer does the actual development of website. And you can also, since this web designer does mainly the creative part of the website, and you can call that person as a right brain person. Generally, it is proven that people who think with their right brain, they are more creative, and people who think with the left part of their brain, they are more logical. Okay, that's where it comes from, right brain person. Let's look at what web developer is responsible for. Web developer, he takes the mockup which is created by the web designer and he brings that mockup to life on the internet. So in other words, that involves the development side of the website. When you develop a website, you need to host it on a web server. So web server could be there on anywhere in the world, but it should be connected to the internet. When you say web server, that web server should resolve to an IP address which will mapped by your DNS. DNS is domain naming domain naming service. Like for example, www.google.com or www.microsoft.com. So these names are easy to remember by human users, but unfortunately, these names are not of much use for the machine, that is computer. So these computers, if they have to communicate with one another, they need to have what is called unique address, that is IP address, internet protocol address. But these internet protocol address are not easy to remember by the human users. So in such a case, you need to do the mapping. So that mapping is done by DNS. So your web server should be reachable through a DNS name like www.google.com. For doing the web development, the web developer needs the skills like HTML, basically scripting or programming in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, Perl, Python, Java, Ruby, and few others. So as I said, web designer is a right brain person, whereas web developer is a left brain person. He's more logical person. So he's more worried about how do I implement the mockup web page into a real web page which can be rendered by the web browsers. So you need to gain web development skills to become a web developer. So web designers generally they work with the Photoshop like tools. Okay, so here is the basically the skills what is required for doing the coding, left hand side, for doing the design on the right hand side. These are some tools and techniques which are used by the black one is the it's a web designer. The white one on the left hand side is the web developer. Okay, so you need to be a full stack developer. You need to do both front end web development and also back end web development. The front end web development basically involves defining the components that are on the page using HTML, and you need to make them look pleasing visually. So you do this styling using CSS, and if you have to do some interaction with the end user or human user, so then you need to program that using JavaScript. And you have productivity improving tools framework, that is frameworks. You have frameworks for JavaScript, CSS and HTML. You need frameworks to basically make you more productive, to do a lot of things in a short duration of time. Let's look at what is a backend web development. Backend web development is basically the one which creates the page components dynamically by the web server. So this includes basically your web server should dynamically create the HTML component and CSS and JavaScript. Normally CSS and JavaScript will remain more or less same for a particular website, but whereas HTML will keep changing for different users. So whenever this web server sends a page dynamically to the web browser, at that web browser side there is a human user who is actually watching your website on the web browser. You can do a backend web development using any of these programming languages: Java, JavaScript, PHP, Perl, Python, Ruby. So note that the main goal of backend web development is to make the response times. The site should be very responsive to the end users. Whereas the goal of front-end web development is to make the website look more pleasing and usable by the end user. So the focus of this webinar is the front-end web development. So we'll not be discussing much about back-end web development in this seminar. So before I go on to the trends, I would like to just give you a picture to understand what are the roles played by HTML, JavaScript and CSS. HTML, as I said, it defines the structure of the page, and you can assume to be like a skeleton of a human being. JavaScript, it provides the interactivity with the user and provides dynamic updates on the web page. You can compare that to like you need muscles to move the different limbs of your body. And CSS, for once you have the body with muscles, it's not good enough. You need to present it in a nice looking fashion. So that is done by using CSS styling. Let's look at few of the modern web development trends. So there, to really cover all the web development trends, it's beyond the scope of it'll take more than 1 hour. So hence it's beyond the scope of the time provided for this webinar, which is 1 hour. So hence I picked up the most important, most usable, most frequently used the trends in the web development. So yeah, here are the few. First one is, I would say, it's a responsive web design. So this is it's becoming a hot trend to make the website responsive. The next one is, earlier days in the initial, like web started somewhere around 1995 to the general public. So almost like 20 years ago. Those days, or even 10 years back, website were more or less static. You'll have some static content, and you'll have at the most some buttons. You click them, you'll get another page, or it'll take some action. not much of the motion movement of elements was involved 10 years back. But nowadays, to make interaction engaging, so you need to have the movement of elements on the web interface. And also nowadays, the single page applications is also a trend. If any of you used the LinkedIn um, page, and there's one section where users can write the articles in their professional expertise domain. So those articles, if you scroll down to the end of the article, whatever is the next article, relevant article, it will come as a continuation of that page. So you'll never go out of that page, means you will continuously keep seeing one article after another. So that is the one of the best example of single page application. So for implementing single page application, one of the popular frameworks that are available today, which is gaining popularity, is AngularJS. And until now, I would say until 5 years ago, people were using the tables for having a layout of the elements on the web page, or sometimes people were using div elements, div elements. But that's the old practice. The if you have to be like a professional programmer with adopting the modern trends, then you should be using Flexboxes to get the nice looking layout of the elements on the web page. And then on the backend web technology side, PHP is a well proven technology for generating the web page dynamically. But now the trend is to use Node.js on the backend side. Node.js, note that uh, you can do the coding using JavaScript. So you might have been thinking that JavaScript is required only for doing the programming on the front end side. If you are thinking so, then let me tell you that you can use JavaScript for doing the programming on the backend side as well if you're running your Node.js on the backend side. Yeah, let's start with responsive web design. Responsive web design, the term was coined by a person by name Ethan Marcotte. So he wrote an article on an online magazine called A List Apart way back in May 2010. So at that time, he introduced the concept of responsive web design. So you might be wondering, why do you need a responsive web design? So responsive web design, initially it may take about approximately 30% or 50% more effort initially to make it the site responsive. But what are the benefits you get by making your site responsive is almost the benefit return on the investment what you put initially is almost 300% or even more in terms of uh, the time saved in the development, and also in terms of the user experience and the business it can generate for you. And if you develop a site using the responsive design principles, then in the long run it simplifies the website maintenance. Let's say if you basically making some changes, or if you have to support a new devices, a device with a different screen dimensions, then your responsive web design will come in handy. So let's understand what responsive web design means. Basically your website should respond to the context. Say context is basically it could be device orientation, whether it's a portrait mode or landscape mode, or screen sizes, like smartphone will have different screen size, and even tablet is little bigger size than smartphone, and desktop obviously bigger than tablet. And you might be viewing that website on a display medium like screen, or on a print medium, uh, on a printer. So depending upon whatever is the context, or in which the website is being used, it should give an optimal viewing experience and optimal user experience. So if your website can respond to that, then it is a responsive web design. Yeah, let's see, I mean, how we can apply this responsive web design principles and how we can achieve responsiveness in the web development. You um, you get the responsiveness by adaptively styling the page using the CSS, that is cascading style sheet, and you can use them in other techniques like fluid grids for getting uh, a layouts which change depending on the context. Note that this grid layouts in CSS3, though standard is more or less finalized, but still the browsers are yet to support it. There is not a good support for grid layouts. So hence, we, as far as possible, you should try avoiding grid layouts. The reason is, I mean, if it is not supported on a web browser used by the user, so then user will not have a good user experience with whatever the browser he or she has. Therefore, as a web developer, you should avoid the grid layouts until there is a full support by the multiple web servers, web browsers. And there's another feature called media queries in CSS3. So for media queries, the browsers have all the 5 different browsers: Chrome, Firefox, Mozilla Firefox, Microsoft IE, Internet Explorer, and Opera and Safari. Note that Safari browser is available on Windows as well, but Safari is quite popular on the Mac OS. So, and another technique is to use the fluid images. Basically, the image should change depending on the size of your browser window. And another technique you can use to make your site responsive is to use the relative units of measure rather than absolute values. So whenever you have to specify a length unit, something related to the length dimension, then you need to specify the units in using either percentages in terms of EM, M, REM, which is root M or relative M. VW is a viewport width, viewport height. Okay, these are the few units you should use for getting the responsiveness of the web page. So note that there are other units of measure like pixels, points, inches, centimeters, millimeters, and so on. So those also can be used for length dimension, but if you use those units of measure, then your website will not be responsive. It will always have fixed layout and fixed size. So even if you resize your window, so you will be seeing the same size elements on the web page. Whereas if you use the relative units of measure, depending on the orientation of the device and depending on the window size and the device screen width, so you can, and depending upon whether you are printing or viewing it, so you can basically get the responsiveness on the website. Okay, so let me just quickly give a demo of Flexbox. So I'll reserve all the question and answer session to the end. See, here you can see a typical layout of a web page. Here you can see the header. Left hand side is navigation links, and the middle the articles, the main content, and the right hand side side portion, which is generally you'll put some additional related links, or you can put advertisements as well. And at the bottom you have footer. Note that this is the normal layout, and you just notice it. I'm just reducing the size. Okay, you see here. So this is a responsive web design. So the elements which was the navigation which was on the left hand side, aside which is on the right hand side. So they are no more the remaining on the left side and the right side. So it comes one below the other. So now depending on the, see now the this I specified that once the width of the window is smaller than here 400 pixels, not 400 pixels. Let me see what is the code. So here I'll just show it. Here I specified that yeah, the width is let's say 640 pixels and less, then it changes to the mobile like layout. Okay, this is one example of Flexbox. And let me show one more example. Yeah, here you can see we have three boxes, and as soon as I move cursor on top of it, that element expands. And when I move other, so now the middle box is expanded. So such type of animation you can get it. Note that this is combines flex boxes and also motion in the motion of the element. Yeah, next design trend is basically the elements on the web page or website should move depending on the user interaction or an event. Event could be like a click, or event could be like mouse over. Just now I demonstrated a Flexbox wherein as soon as I mouse over onto a portion of the element, then that element expands, and when you move out, then that contracts and the other element expands. So this is like you get to see basically life on the visual elements on the website. So the motion UI basically adds life to the visual elements. Rather than being static, they become dynamic and they react to your action. So this motion UI is getting popularity because it visually communicates the state of the element to the human user. So it responds like, okay, so rather than being static, if it responds to your action, then you feel good about it, that okay, yes, it is responding to you. And it another purpose of incorporating motion in the UI elements is that it extends or retains the user attention. If it's a static website, user attention is very limited, but if it is engaging, it's interacting with you, then you feel like playing with it. So if you are if you know, there's a so there are popular games like say Talking Tom. So whatever you speak into the mobile phone, it speaks that back to you. So that is nothing but it's basically some say motion in the UI, and also it's replaying back. Since it repeats the same thing what you said, you feel like I'm talking to it more and more. That's how it extends and retains the attention of the user. So the motion UI you achieve using the transition and animation of the UI elements. So overall, if you have programmed the motion of the UI elements, then it gives the better user experience, and because it's more engaging to the user and it's pleasing, and they spend more time, and they tend to give you business. Yeah. So as I said, using CSS-3 transforms on events, transitions, and there's a keyframe animations. So using these techniques, you can achieve the motion of the UI elements. Yeah. The next one is the layout with the Flexbox. Layout with Flexboxes. So just I demonstrated the Flexboxes. It combines both responsive web design and as well as the Flexbox. So see, until a few years ago, the most of the web designers, not web designers, web programmers, web developers, they were using table tags for getting the nice looking page layout. But that is a very bad option. Nowadays, you should not use table tags for getting the page layout. But later on, the developers started using div tags, but you have to end up doing a lot of nesting of these div tags, one inside the other. So that is also, it's it's okay, acceptable, but still it's a bad option because that is the old style of doing the web development. The problem with that multiple levels of nesting of div elements is that when the maintenance will be that will be very poor. In the sense, if you have to maintain that code, you need to spend more time, and if you have to make any changes, you have to spend a lot of time to rearranging the elements. Yeah, a better way of doing the same, getting a nice looking layout is using CSS properties called float, clear. So these are the good options, but the problem with this float and clears is that uh, as long as they work, it's good. But if slight uh, variations, like if you change the mm, one property, or you change the window size, then it it may it may be broken. There's a possibility. But using flexboxes and the CSS3 flex properties, so all those things are taken care. So though Flexbox has been standardized way back in 2009, so unfortunately there's not many people are aware of Flexboxes. Even though it's been 6 years, uh, all the browsers support the Flexboxes. Unfortunately, not many people even haven't heard of the word Flexbox. And since they haven't heard of it, they don't use it. Yeah. So let us, say the advantage of Flexbox is that, okay, um, once you have achieved a particular layout of the web page in one browser, it's very likely that you'll have a consistent layout across the browsers, irrespective of what browser you use. Uh, Assuming that, okay, that browser version is after 2009, so then, so it's a very good chance that browser will support the flex boxes. If you are using older versions like IE 5, 6, or 7, then you may not get the flex box support, but at least IE 8 onwards, you have good support for flex boxes. And with flex boxes, you have good much control of the page layout, and there's a good flexibility so that you can play around with the elements. And another thing is, since Flexbox it's recent, and it is the modern way of getting the good page layout. And so if you develop a website now, it's quite likely that it's future proof. So you don't have to worry that later, probably 5 years or 10 years down the line, you may have to change few things on our website, because Flexbox, at least it's going to be there for at least next 10 years. Yeah. Next is the single page applications, which has been a trend nowadays. As I said, one best example which most of us use is the user articles on LinkedIn page. So for getting them, for programming single page applications, you need technologies like Ajax for making asynchronous call to the backend web server. And whenever you have to send the data or receive the data from the backend web server, you need to use what is called JSON. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. This is the string representation of JavaScript objects, so which you send it to the backend server and get the data back from the server. Note that though it says it's JavaScript object notation, so since it's quite popular, after the XML was being used for web services, now people started using JSON for web services implementation, for exchanging the data between client and server, or for that matter, with basically from any other computer. So JSON is very easy to read by the human users, and also easy to process by the machines as well. So not only there's a good support for this JSON format in JavaScript, even other languages like Java and PHP, Python, Perl, other languages also, there's a very good support. Basically, once you have the JSON string, you can convert to object, and from object you can convert back to JSON string. AngularJS is a MVC. Basically, it's a MVC JavaScript framework. MVC stands for Model View Controller. So until now, Model View Controller frameworks were available only on the backend side. The popular frameworks in PHP were Laravel, Cake PHP, and so on. Whereas in the front end side, there is no framework which is following MVC design pattern. So Google has come out with this AngularJS, and they made them in open source, and this being quite popular, and it's quite powerful as well. So this single page application, the term has coined by a person by name Steve N in way back in 2005, almost like 10 years ago. But only recently, I would say last 2-3 years, the single page applications are being developed and deployed. So basically, single page application, nothing but the whole application is there in single page. You never have to move out of the page. So only unless you wish to move out of the web, like that website, only then you may have to you'll be going out. Otherwise, all the related things you can see in the single page by scrolling up or down. So on like one good example of a single page web application is our the Gmail and also Google Drive. So most of the things what you need to do, you do in the single page. In the same page, it opens the different screens. So one good thing about this is that there's no user interruption in the user interaction. Let's say when you navigate from one page to another page, then basically there's a small time gap and user basically is not engaged. Whereas in this case, single page applications give a better user experience. So I was giving example of LinkedIn where the articles written by users. So once the previous user's article ends, the next user's article starts as a continuous stream of web pages. So in single page application, even if there's a multiple pages that's being shown, the page moves from one page to another page very smoothly. You don't have to navigate out of the page. So for achieving this single page applications in web development, there are multiple frameworks available. So those are quite popular ones in AngularJS, EmberJS, Meteor.js, and React.js. As I said, you need to be familiar with Ajax, JSON, WebSockets, and web storage. Web storage is a HTML5 concept. Basically, rather than using cookies on the server side and the client side, you can use the web storage. Yeah, the practical applications of this single page applications is, as I said, articles written by the LinkedIn users. And in LinkedIn, you may see that the other users you may know. And when you're scrolling, it'll keep showing them all other users as though so that page is that long. The page is never that long. Page is initially what you see is only that much is the page that contains. But once the browser detects that you are scrolling beyond the page, then it immediately fires a Ajax call to the backend web server and requests the next content to be shown. So that comes, it could be in the form of a JSON or XML format, and you take it and dynamically insert that to the bottom of your web page. So that's how you'll see that that page is very long. So that is possible using with the Ajax programming, not Ajax programming, JavaScript, and also making Ajax calls. So one problem with this the single page applications is that there's a tighter coupling between front end and back end. So if the back end, if you change, there is good chance that the front end side might be broken. So you, before making a decision to go for a single page applications, you should be aware of this. And also to develop the single page application, the regular web pages can be done by anyone. But to do this, the developers need to be smart in using um, Ajax calls, when to make Ajax call, and how to dynamically insert without uh, having basically the page should look smooth, the transition. So for that, you need to use some smart programming techniques. Note that if a website is developed using single page concept, then it is not very friendly to the web crawlers, because web crawlers depends on, basically they depend on the unique URLs of the pages. But in this case, the unique URL is only one. So the web crawlers may not discover the multiple pages that are existing on your website. So it makes it difficult for the web crawlers to crawl all the content on your website. So there is some solutions for this. So the multiple web pages which is displayed on a single page is basically you prefix with the fragment URLs. That's how to some extent the problem is alleviated. Yeah, let me do a quick time check. Yeah, we have another 8 minutes. Yeah, so yeah, what we talked about until now is mainly the front end side. So let's briefly give an overview of what is the backend web development. Basically, when you talk about backend web development, you are writing code that that runs on a web server or a web application server. So this is the one which is the place where you host your website. So when you do the backend development, what you're doing is essentially generating HTML page elements dynamically on the fly, depending on the user, depending on the option chosen by the user. And note that only HTML content changes from time to time or depending on the user, but whereas CSS styles and JavaScript generally they remain same, because you will have more or less the consistent look and feel, and also the same behavior of the web page. So therefore, for the CSS and JavaScript code remains same for all the users. Like for example, you do a search on Google page, home page, and I do a search, and your CSS file and JavaScript file will be same as mine. But when you do a search, sorry, after doing a search, your CSS and JavaScript file mine look the same. But the query, sorry, the HTML elements what you see and HTML elements what I see could be different, because when you would have search for HTML string, I search for CSS string. Therefore, the HTML contents will be different from each user, different for each user. Yeah, server side. There's a few server side web technologies. You do basically programming using any of these programming languages. It could be a procedure language like Java application, which runs on a web application server like Apache Tomcat, or it could be IBM WebSphere. Previously, it was like there's a BA WebLogic as well now. And you need to do programming using scripting languages. So there is again two types of languages, like traditional scripting languages like PHP, Perl, and CGI. Whereas there's a modern scripting language like JavaScript, which runs on Node.js and Python. Python has got a framework, web application framework called Django, and Ruby is also another programming language. A corresponding web application framework is Ruby on Rails. I was saying that Node.js is now is a trendy. The reason is, Node.js, see, if you know JavaScript, then you can do backend programming as well as the front-end programming. So you don't have to learn a new language like PHP or Python or Perl. So that way, your productivity improves improves by not having to learn a new language. This Node.js has got a, a JavaScript engine which is developed by Google, that's called V8 engine. Over a period of time, Google has really made a lot of performance optimization on V8 JavaScript engine. That's the reason why Node.js has got good performance, and it's got faster response times. And nowadays, if you want a good performance um, of your website, then people are preferring Node.js. Let me do a time check. Yeah, we have another 4 minutes. Yeah. So see, until now we talked about the backend program, front-end web development and backend web development. Ultimately, you do this front-end web, backend web development to actually to create a website and host it. So let's understand what is a website. Website is nothing but a just basically it's a composed of one or more HTML pages. So generally, a website will have a default page that will be displayed when you hit that domain name. Is like it will be named as index.html or index.php. So you don't have to explicitly mention that. If you don't specify it, it will display one of these. It will serve the web server will serve one of these pages, which will be stored on that web server. So basically, you need a web server to host a website. So web server could be like it's a simple HTTP web server. So which is even depending on the which operating system you are running. So it could be a process by name HTTPD or Apache 2, Nginx, iNet Manager in case of a Internet Information Server, which is a web server from Microsoft, or it could be you could be running your website on the web application server. So if you write your backend program in Java, then you need this application server, which could be like open source software like Apache Tomcat, or licensed software like WebSpace from IBM. So for basically both for hosting a website or for sending that web page to the a remote user, you need multiple technologies like HTML, which is hypertext markup language, HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol, TCP/IP, which is transmission control and internet protocol. These are the protocols which either you need to have at the network layer or at the application level, application layer to support to basically the develop and share your website page with the remote user, and ultimately it has to be rendered, which is the HTML page has to be rendered by the web browser. Note that you can host a website on any of the operating systems, could be Linux, Windows, or Mac OS. Okay. Yeah. So this is a graph which shows what is the percentage growth of the web developers in the job market. So this is the trend. You can see that since 2006, the trend has been growing, and in the last few months, it's really exponential. And therefore, see, if you are a full stack developer, then your marketability in the job market increases tremendously.